everything, it's a game with rules, and you have to understand how to play the game and how to play within the rules of the game.
Welcome to Not Another CEO podcast. I'm your host, David Politis. Every week, we talk to inspiring leaders and get the true stories, the ups and downs, the lessons learned, and come away with actionable advice for our own journeys. Today's guest is a unique blend of visionary, operator, and hustler. A multi-time entrepreneur who 13 years ago set his sights on revolutionizing how property management is done. He took the pains he experienced as a real estate investor and landlord and turned that into a passion for creating a better experience around multifamily apartment management. He's raised over $70 million to go after that vision. And today, his company works with more than half of the top 50 largest property managers in the world, and his company is changing the way millions of units are being managed across North America and beyond. Please welcome founder and CEO of HappyCo, Jindou Lee.
Hello, hello. I should take you with me everywhere. That's the best intro I've ever gotten in my life. So
Good. Well, you can share it with your friends and family, you know.
I will.
Okay, great. First question, as you know, I ask everyone, what's the one thing you've done at HappyCo, big or small, that's had the biggest impact and you'll do again if you're CEO of another company in the future?
Yeah, that's a good question. I really thought long and hard about this question, but I think there's probably it's a two-part answer. I don't like conforming, so I'm going to give you a two-part answer. I think that the first thing, it always comes down to, for us, like distilling your culture and your core values, right? So really coming together with your team and defining what your core values are, how you live your life, how you want to act with that. When, like they always say, culture and core values are how you act when no one is watching. And so how do you distill that into something where everyone go, oh, I get it. This is how we want to act. I think that was like one key component of that. But the second part is actually protecting the culture and core values that you've created. And I think that's the harder part, right? Because that's actually the tactical, the day-to-day grind. And so when I talk about protecting the culture, it really, what I've learned is there's probably two tools that you can use. One is hiring and the other one is firing. And why that's important is you want to make sure that you're interviewing, you're looking for the right thing. So hiring correctly, you're trying to find the best fit for your organization. The challenge to that is what I've learned is you just don't know until someone starts working with you, right? It's like dating. You just don't know until you start dating and maybe living together. Oh, the toothbrush isn't put on the right side of the sink or whatever. But I think that's where the firing thing comes in pretty handy. You hear this very often from, all the great successful investors, CEOs in the world, hire slow, fire fast. It's a lesson that I still learn today. But if someone really breaks the core values and the culture of what you're trying to do, you have to let that person go. And I think what I've learned is I had a lot of guilt with that in the early days. But what I learned is if you're not happy with someone and how they're acting, chances are that person is not very happy where they are as well, right? We all know it and we all can feel it. And it's almost like just letting that person go and find an organization or a place where they can be themselves. So I don't know if I'm just lying to myself, but I feel great comfort in that. Essentially.
I want to go that what you just said, I feel is I believe what you just said. I believe so much that in the beginning part of my career, I'm not sure I believed it. As time has gone on and I've worked with more people, fired more people, I agree with that. Like the people who aren't doing well, it's not good for them either. If they're not doing well for whatever the reason, they're not going to advance. They're not going to actually achieve anything that they probably want to achieve. And I think that is a really hard, firing is still hard, but if you really think about that, it does make it something where you say, the longer I extend this, the long run prolonging this pain.
Yeah, and you know, like a lot of the times is actually like a slow death, and it eats away at both you and that candidate, right? And I think the crappiest part about it is that if you don't have that frank, honest, candid conversation early on, and you don't, you know, I think giving that person an opportunity to course correct, because we don't know what good looks like, and unless you tell me, I can't read your mind. I think that's important, but after having that conversation, you know, once or twice, you're like, hey, this is not working out for these particular reasons, and I think it's best just to like move on. But you know, it's easy to say from my seat, right? But at the end of the day, you're messing with people's like ego, right? Their sense of belonging, and you're messing with it's their livelihood. Like I don't know, right? Like I remember when I was younger in my career, I only had like $5,000 in my bank at any time, and if I lost my job, how would I pay rent the month after? And so I can completely empathize, and I'm like, man, it's a really not a great position for both people, but in the long run, it's better. So
How do you, when you talk about distilling down the values,
mm,
did you do that day one? I mean, you started the company day one, you wrote that down. Or when did that happen?
yeah. So how it came about? This is like my first job in my career. I was working for this company, and I essentially got bullied by my supervisor, my manager. And the founders of this company is a small web development agency. They were bullying, you know, they were just like really crappy people, you know, and they're just like, it was a horrible place to work. I used to cry at my desk
No.
for the last 6 months of my time there. Every day I'll go to work, put on my headphones, put on Eminem, get really angry, and then start tearing up. And it was like a jail, right? So I've been on the other side, and I know exactly what it feels like for some people. Um, and anyway, so I left that organization. It was a great company. I left the organization, and then I joined another company in the video gaming industry. And the day one, I went into work. I was a graphic designer, so I basically created a script to update 1,000 images. Took me like 30 minutes, right? My manager, actually, he wasn't even my manager. It was just the guy who was managing another team. Came out and said, "Good job, buddy." He's American because I was in Australia, right? He's American. He's like, "Good job," and he's a New Yorker. So he's like, "This is awesome," and I'm like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa! I don't like this praise. What is happening here?" Um, and I just realized, you know, both companies were very successful. Both founders of both companies were amazing. Like they're smart, intelligent, but to make money and be successful, it doesn't matter how you act. You could act a certain way, or you
Mm,
can act like a douchebag. You can act like
mm.
the most generous person on earth. It's actually a choice. And so I remember like thinking, man, if I start a company one day, I want to make it a choice to be a good person and good actor and what I think is good. Um, and the money will just come in the end. So fast forward, what happened was when we started HappyCo, I didn't know how to create core values and culture, right? Because I wasn't like from the corporate world. So I remember just reading a book, and I read a lot, and there was one that stood out, which was the Journey to Mars or Mission to Mars. I don't know
Mm.
if you've ever done that, right? So it's essentially like, hey, if you're gonna, the world is coming to an end, you're gonna go to Mars, and you have to repopulate Mars. Saying this out loud sounds a little bit wrong, but yeah, you're gonna populate Mars. Um, who are you gonna bring? You can choose 10 people in your company to go populate Mars. And so my co-founder and I, we brought 10 folks. We identified 10 people which thought had the right core values. We just felt right with them, the right people we wanted to duplicate. And we went offsite, and we just had all these post-it notes, and kind of just wrote down what we felt was, what did we want from the organization, what sort of culture, and then what do we currently have, and what we do not want to let go. And the trick to this is you get rid of all the aspirational stuff, right? And then you just focus on like the items that we have today, and we want to continue to nourish and all that. So we came up with like 10 or so core values. Then my co-founder and I went aside, and we picked 5 of them that we really liked and we thought embodied everything from that list of 10. And that became our core values. We did that probably about when we were about 20, 30 people in the organization. So
Wow.
probably about year 2, year 3. Yeah.
Great. That exercise, what's so good about that exercise is you have the people in the room,
You know,
not you. Because I have talked to a lot of CEOs who say, well, I just came up with the values,
yeah.
or me and my co-founder came up with the value, but actually how you just described that is really good because you're bringing the people in the room who embody those values.
Yeah, because what I learned is like I'm not the kind of like if you meet me in a conference or whatever, and you like if you talk to me, people don't even know I'm the CEO. Like they'll think I'm like an engineer, right? Because the Asian good looks, right? Yeah, you're an engineer. So and my way of leading, I'm not very good at just forcing down. Like I don't have that kind of a personality. So I thought like, and my co-founder was the same. He was more an engineer, techie, smart guy. And we felt like the only way to really do this was to let your next level down. Like they're the ones that are going to procreate, recreate. They're going to recreate like that next level of people. They're going to hire people in their image. And that's how we do it. We hire people in our image because that's what we think good looks like. So that's what we do. We just thought, let's let that level. But our job is to be able to curate who was in that 10. So that's what we did.
Have you changed those values since you did that exercise?
Yeah. So we use a system called EOS and the Entrepreneur Operating System. And as part of that, every year EOS, you kind of look at your core values, you revisit them,
Oh,
and you say, do we still live by these? We want to modify, edit, change. I'd say like of the 5, we still have 3 of them till today, and then we've added, we've modified 2 of them and updated 2 of them. And I
got
think
it.
I don't know if that's the right or wrong way. I know some people are like, hey, these things never change. But I guess that's the designer in me, right? There's no sort of black or white, just all 50 shades of gray. And I think to me, I'm like, well, the organization is shifting and changing. Um, like we want to just make sure that we're living our core values. And so we kind of modify it slightly. It's the essence is still the same. It's just the wording is slightly different and the examples are different.
I like it. So let's keep on the people front. One of the things we've met a couple of times now, and your business has grown revenue wise a lot, customer wise a lot, and people wise, it did go through some crazy growth periods, and then also periods where you shrunk the team. And from what I gather, the business is growing pretty well with the team not growing at the same pace now. Um, and I'm curious what your take is on that. Meaning, is that have you learned something through this
Oh
process?
man.
And I'm sure a lot,
I
but
think yeah, I've learned a lot during this recent phase of our growth. You know, we added 100 people in a 9-month span, 9-12 month span.
which was basically doubling, right? I mean, that's essentially doubling in 9 months.
Exactly. And then we to give you some context, we shrunk. We had to do a riff, which was painful. We got rid of 60 people in the company. And then for the last 12 months, we've steadied our headcount, but we've essentially like, grew the business by 30% but we steadied the headcount. We had no
Wow.
additional hires. There was churn and we kind of replaced people. But my thesis, or at least the way I was thinking about it was, I don't know if you watched that movie. Is it 300? The movie 300? Was
Yeah,
it?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like 300, Spartans can take over the world, right? And I was always like, what if we could just bring in the best people? Because every additional headcount you bring in adds complexity. And I, I think it's just really hard. You have to manage new personalities, right? And I think that's where large organizations, at least from when I've spoken to a lot of people that work for large corporate America. Actually, I met one, a CEO of a really large company of 4,000, 5,000 people. And I asked him, I'm like, hey, what do you think about your workforce? And he goes, oh yeah, half of them are really, really good, like A players. And the other half are really bad, like G players. And he goes, I just don't know which half. It just, as the company, as the organization grows, you're less in touch, right, with every single person. And so I just thought, like, what if we could just, bring in make sure we maintain a high standard, and really just keep A players in the organization, right? Yeah. So that's what I kind of was thinking about. So, really, like, the last 12 months has just been figuring out what do A players look like? How do we keep making sure that we have conversations with people that are falling below the grade so that they can, course correct? Because some people were A players when we were smaller, but when you grow, like, it's hard. It's a different company. It looks the same name, same logo, but it's a different company. So how do you have that conversation with them, push them to the next level? If they can't get there, then you have to, again, have difficult conversations. Or maybe bring in like another leader or person in that role, and they can kind of, they can't grow with the company that way. So that's probably the big thing that I've kind of learned is, like, you just have to keep the bar really, really high. But it's really hard to keep the bar high.
Do you think that people on the team understand that actually this is like this is a good thing that you're not
Oh,
growing,
yeah.
but the revenues, do they feel
Yes.
that?
Yeah. So this is the kicker, and I read about this all the time. So I'm like, I slap myself in the face because of it. But the real A players understand that. And in fact, like, when we did that riff, we had a lot of people that were super sad. I was super sad. We had to riff people that we actually really like to hang out with, like good people, and some of them were actually pretty good. Like, they were B plus, maybe some of them were even A players, actually, if I were to be honest. But 12 months later, I talk to everyone in the organization, and they're like, hey, that was the best call we did. Like, today I can do my work. I'm surrounded by other people that are as passionate as me, that, get shit done, that really push the envelope. And I don't have to, like, carry them anymore. Like, and everyone is challenging each other, making sure we're getting to the next level. So I think what I've learned as a leader, it's kind of our job to, to choose the best team and make sure you don't have, like, players that are not bringing the team up. But yeah, they definitely have seen the like, everyone was so skeptical when we did the riff, right? Like, they're like, hey, we can't even operate with all these people. How are we going to do it with, like, 60 less people? And
Right.
now I'm like, dude, this is awesome. And I think what we've done is we've focused a lot on, like, automation, or how do we automate tasks? How do we just not think about adding a body, adding another body? Because that's the cop out way of, like, we need more people. And sometimes you need it, but what we found is, don't just keep adding bodies.
What's interesting, when I think about my time at any company, I would interview people, especially more junior people earlier in their career. And people would say, so how do you think, what's the growth look like in the coming year or 2 years? And I would say, like, oh, I think we're probably going to get, double in revenue, whatever. They're like, no, but how many people will we add? And I would say, oh, I mean, hopefully not too many, like maybe 10, 50, whatever. And they'd say, oh, you're not going to grow a lot? Like, is it something wrong? People, and I think that's just associated, at least in my view, like, more people equals better, more people equals more growth, more people equals more opportunities. And then we had an advisor who was he was CTO of this company, that one of the most profitable companies of all time on a per employee basis. And our engineers were asking him, so when you were hiring and this, he's like, my goal was to hire nobody.
Yeah.
And to be as profitable on a per employee basis as possible. And he's like, that's what you should be proud of. Not that you were able to grow the headcount as much as possible. He's like, and by the way, over time, the employees who were there all benefited from the fact that it was so profitable.
The other thing I've learned, Dave, is, like, as the company has grown, I've been able to, like, to influence less and less in the organization. So earlier on, right, if the product broke, I could go in, I could fix stuff, blah, blah, blah. Support, get on the support call. Like, I could do everything. I could sell, But as the company gets bigger, like, the opportunities for me to dive into everything is very difficult. And the one thing I've learned is, like, the one way I can really drive outcomes is by setting the scorecard. You know, like, so if I wanted to drive, I don't know, like headcount growth, then I would have a number which I want everyone to hit, which is headcount growth number. But if I wanted to drive that profitability, I would focus on the metric of, you know, revenue per employee, and everyone is compensated or is looking at that one number as an organization. And I think that's actually the hardest thing to do is to think of the one or two, like maybe three metrics, right? Like, what are the most important things? And then hit that drum beat every single day. But lucky I'm getting older and more senile, so I can just remember one thing and just keep repeating it. Otherwise, man, you know, when you're young, you're like, I'll do 10 things. Now I'm like, I can just do one. My brain doesn't feel as big anymore. Yeah.
Talk to me about, you know, your first set of customers. Cause you know, you kind of, I would say in some ways almost stumbled into this business.
Yeah.
How did you get your first, let's call it 5 customers, 10 customers?
Yeah. So I have a graphic design background. So I studied graphic design at university, and so I was always been like a UI UX designer, always designing stuff for video games and all that stuff. And so what happened was, I had a small company that was a web agency, so we built websites for people. Sold that, made a little bit of money, not a lot, and I started investing in real estate. So I was buying properties in Australia at the time, and then in 2010, I was buying in Cleveland and Memphis in the US.
From Australia?
Yeah, from Australia. It's in hindsight, I'm like, oh, that's such a dumb move. But, you know, like at the time, like, I'm so smart. In fact, those are still the areas I invest in today, those 2 markets, because I think I really like those markets because it's very middle class, working class, middle class, you know. I find like that's the salt of the earth people. Like my parents were middle class. I grew up like lower middle class, and it's just people that just bust their ass working, you know, and they want to pay rent on time. They're not trying to do anything dodgy and shady. They just want to bring up a family. And I love those markets for it. So I started investing in property, and one day my property managers said to me, hey, we had the tenants skip town, so we need you to, you know, like give us more money to fix your properties. And I was like, wait, why? Like, don't you have the before and after? Like, don't you take photos of the? And they said, well, we should, but we don't, you know, like excuses. I'm like, oh my God, like, what do you guys use? And they're like, well, we use you know, we use these like older pieces of software like Yardi at that stage. And Yardi at that time, 2010, they had no mobile. They actually had a mobile app, but it wasn't very easy to use. So I took a look at it, and I'm like, oh man, no wonder you can't take photos easily. So I made some screenshots on an iPad 1. The iPad 1 just came out. Made some screenshots, and I just rang 20 property management companies. I said, hey, I've got this idea for an app to do inspections. What do you think? Can I come show it to you? 20 of them said yes.
I just want to be cold calls.
Cold call. Picked up the yellow pages at that stage. I don't know if you guys had yellow pages for property management. I just rang them, and the 20, I think about 2 of them were my property managers in the US that managed my property. So I just spoke to people about it. Everyone said, come in, show me what you've built or are building. So I went in and I demoed screenshots, and they look like a real app because we designed it to look like a real app. People
pre-Figma,
Figma. This is like literally a photo, and it's just doing the photo app. And at that stage, I think people weren't as knowledgeable about vaporware and screenshots, you know, because it just wasn't like, there wasn't Figma. So 19 of the people, actually everyone I saw was like, hey, this is amazing. I'm going to be so happy. My property manager is going to be happy. My owner's going to be, landlord's going to be happy. You know, now we've got documentation, blah, blah, blah. And so we thought, And then the next question they asked was like, when can we use it? And I'm like, oh, this is not real. And they're like, but okay. And I'm like, how much would you pay for it? They're like, I don't know. So we just said, why don't we just charge you $50 a month for unlimited usage? Dumb move, but I had no idea what I was doing. So we had 19 of the 20 people I visited sign a contract to use the app that we didn't even have yet. So that's how we started the company. My co-founder was working in another video gaming company. And I just said to him, he used to work for me in the last company I sold. So I said to him, hey, can you build this, like after work? And
Yeah.
yeah, I guess so. And so he's charging me like $20 an hour just to code this app. And that's how we basically got started.
Wow.
We started that way. Yeah.
How many of those customers are still customers today?
Oh, I would say like maybe like four of them are still today.
Did they really build the product with you? Where the,
Yes.
because this is an industry like a little different than like if you're selling to DevOps or like
Yeah,
to
because
market,
you know how to build for
yeah,
yourself. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
The interesting thing is because I had an agency and because I'm a graphic designer, the only way I know how to build stuff is to talk to people and to ask what they do and follow them and do stuff. So in a way, I followed their inspectors or the property managers in the field, and this is one of the earliest things I did. So I followed this guy. He was a maintenance guy, and like
Like
I
physically, you were there with him. I mean,
I was there
physically,
with
you were
him
there.
just watching how he's using this, like, we had a test flight version, so it was just like a prototype that we gave to him, right?
Mhm.
And we're like, hey, go and do some inspections. Let us follow you around. So he walked around and then he was just struggling on this screen. And I'm like, oh God, he doesn't know how to use an iPad. No, I kind of looked closer and I realized that he had massive sausage fingers. Like his fingers were 3 times the size of mine. And we had made the slider really small, the hit state really small. So he was trying to like tap on it and slide it. He just couldn't. And I'm like, oh my God, we need bigger buttons. And
Wow.
so we went back to the drawing board. And what I did with my co-founder, we're like, hey, can you make the hit state bigger? Let's make everything bigger, dopier, simple, easier to use. Um, and then if you look at like, I don't know, circa 2012, 13, you look at inspection apps, all of them looked a certain way until we came on the scene and we started making these big dopey buttons. And today, if you look at it, every inspection app has the big dopey buttons. Like we kind of started that trend. But it's just one of those things where a lot of times you build software, you don't think about the end user. You're especially enterprise, you're selling to the executive layer, right?
Yes. Yes.
Report.
Yeah.
But we were fortunate we started with the end user and then worked our way up. And so I think that was our secret sauce in the early days. So we did work with our customers on that and then slowly iterated on the product.
One of my biggest breakthroughs, probably in my career and companies, was exactly how you're describing, sitting with IT people,
Mhm.
watching over their shoulder as they did their job. And to what you just said, I think it's just something that a lot of entrepreneurs don't do, a lot of founders don't do,
Yeah.
and actually in 1 hour watching this one
Mhm.
person do their job, I was like,
Yeah.
whoa, like this is crazy. You have 150 tabs open in Chrome and you're
Correct.
clicking between and then referencing this spreadsheet. I'm like, what if I just put it for you in one UI? And they're like, oh, that would change everything. And you're like, okay, and it's
Yeah.
like the same kind of thing where it's like just being with like actually physically being with the customer and
Yeah.
watching them work. I mean, you can change an industry. Literally, you can change.
Yeah. And I think that's why in our industry, we're selling typically to like the end users, the maintenance guy, right? And I think it's like, no, no, who wants to sit with a maintenance person? Like
Mhm,
it's not cool. If
mhm.
you're in marketing, you're sitting in some, in a beautiful corporate office with
Yeah,
like good
yeah.
looking people that are, like all cool looking. But maintenance is like grimy, it's dirty, it's unsexy. But to me, having grown up middle class, like that's my dad. It's like hanging out with your
Mhm.
dad, like that's his world. He always fingers always dirty. He's always, tinkering with something. Technology he's not great at, but and he can't learn by reading like
Mm.
he has to learn by very
Doing.
tactile doing,
Mm.
and so I don't know. I just think like it's very interesting. Like you're right. We don't go. We need to kind of get on the floor and play with our kids, if that makes sense. You can't put a standing on play. You have to
I
lie down on the
love that.
ground with your
I
kid,
love that.
throwing them around at that level. So anyway, that's something that I think we did right in the beginning, and we've continued to do that as we've grown. The one caveat is, if you have people that hasn't grown up in the organization, they come from other organizations, that's not part of their DNA. So you have to like really drum it into them, like go sit with the customer, talk to the
Yes.
customer. Like,
Yes.
great, you've designed for us. Yes. But that's been a struggle. When I talk about that period of growth, that's what we had. We hired in all these people that didn't have that same product focus, customer focus, that passion. And it's hard to train people to do that. Like, that's why I
No,
think
you have to
Amazon.
want to. You have to want. You have
Yeah,
to have. I think that is in your DNA of when I've hired people who have that, it just is something you don't have to ask them.
you don't have
You
to ask,
don't have,
exactly. Yeah,
they're kind of like, I get to go on site and watch like, I can't wait. And you're like,
yeah,
really? They're like, I can't, and that's just something that I think is, if you
yeah,
don't want to do it, we had one person, he's like, I just love doing user experience like I just love going with the customer and watching them do stuff.
yeah,
And that just innate, I think.
yeah. Well, I think like I'm very envious of companies like Amazon who have a great training program. They can
Mm.
take smartest people with no experience and instill this culture, like, well, build like, they have the raise the bar or raising the
Yeah, yeah,
bar
yeah, yeah.
hiring thing. They have all these, like, they've codified a lot of the processes to take a diamond in the rough and polish it to become a diamond. I'm so envious of companies like that, and I aspire to one day do that, but it's, yeah. Anyway, that one day.
Yeah, yeah. So let's talk about fundraising, right? Because
Yeah.
you have raised quite a bit of money and you've raised some pretty great investors.
Yeah.
Was it very easy?
Oh, yeah. Super simple. Yeah. I just walked into a room and then, like, everyone just throws money at me. It's, oh man, like, I don't like fundraising. And I'll start by saying, like, fundraising is a very unfair game for founders, right? Because you think of a founder in in a company, like, we may raise 3 times, 4 times, five, maybe six at best, right? And we're playing a game against people that invest for a living. So they're doing this, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, 800 times a year. And so they have a very unfair advantage against us as founders. And, I see a lot of early stage founders, and myself included, we got bullied. We just didn't know we got bullied, right? We're like, oh my God, he's talking to us. The amazing VC company is talking to us. I'm like, yeah, that's their job. Their KPIs are to talk to you, you know? Um, so I just think it's a really unfair game. But having said that, we tried to raise out. I started off doing this company not knowing that you could raise capital.
Hmm.
I remember one day when I first started, someone actually said to me, "Hey, can you build Evernote for me?" The note taking app. And I'm like, "Yeah, for sure. Like, how hard can it be? Just notes, you have in a database, and you have a mobile app." And then I was researching Evernote, and they said they raised, I don't know, 30 million or something
Yeah.
crazy. Right? I'm like, what? People give you money? Like, why do you need so much? Um, so I started with not knowing anything. So I had to learn everything from scratch. And um, we tried to raise our first round in 2012. This is like maybe 9, 10 months into the business. I probably had about 80 meetings before I had my first yes. And it was brutal. It's like walking into a bar and all the girls are lining up on the bar, 80 girls lining up. You go to the first one and she's like, nope, this guy's too ugly. You go to the next one, nope, too short. Nope, too tall. I'm like, God. And it's just like rejection after rejection. So I really don't like fundraising. But over time, I realized that, like everything, it's a game with rules, and you have to understand how to play the game and how to play within the rules of the game.
The last part you just said there, the rules of the game, I think the challenge is, I agree with you. It took me till fundraise 5 to know the rules of the game.
Yeah.
And the thing is you kind of now have missed out on all the,
Yes.
you've played the game without knowing the rules for so long. I think that's why multi-time founders, they have multi-time venture-backed founders have such an advantage the second time because they know the rules of the game. And from the beginning, because to your point, if the beginning, you already get bullied, which I think happens to probably 100% of first-time founders. It sets up everything for future cap table changes. It's kind of
Exactly. And so one of the lessons I learned, this is, so it's all about bringing on the right people at the right stage, having the right team at the right stage. And we were really fortunate because early, the business was 2 years in and we had an acquisition offer, barely doing, I don't know, a couple $100,000 in ARR. And then we had like a mid-teen $1 million acquisition, which we only raised like 600,000 on a
oh my
convertible
God.
note. Yeah. Right. And so it was funny. We met my co-founder and I, we rejected the offer, partly because we're like, what would we do with money? Like our goal is to learn how to build a business and run it, right? Like that's what we want to do, is like learn how to build a business. Otherwise, like we'll just go from, like fraud to fraud. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And just now we're lots of money, but then we're like, I don't know what we'll do with the money. So we decided to know, let's actually build a good business. At that stage, we're so naive. Let's take it to $1 million in ARR or whatever. We stay with it. At that stage, we actually met an attorney who was introduced by a really good friend of mine. He's saying, is like, hey, you should use this guy, Steve Lee. And so he was helping us navigate the acquisition conversation. We passed on it, and he's like, hey, I'm happy to be your attorney. He was good. He's like super responsive, very affordable, great. And so anyway, so he was like, hey, you know what? I used to work on the VCPE side, and I don't like working on that side. So I'm going to help you guys, like navigate this. So fast forward to our next round of funding, we had a term sheet, and the investor gave us this term sheet, and he's like, yeah, these are the terms you have to say yes or no. Our attorney took a look at it and said, nope, red line, red line, red line, red line. Went back to the investor, and the investor said, these are standard terms. These are standard. These are not industry standard. What you're asking is not industry standard. My attorney goes, there's no such thing as industry standard. I learned a really valuable lesson that a contract, you can edit contracts. That's the whole point of them. And what, so going through the exercise, I just learned like standard is standard for them, but not for me. And it's just a negotiation. The challenges we had in our Series A, we were running out of cash. We had we're raising a round. We had the investor that was going to commit $5 million, kept drawing out the process. And so our runway was down from, I'll say like 5 months when we started, then we got the yes, down to 3 days. We were 3 days away from payroll. I rang the investor, and I'm like, hey, what's going on here? And he actually said to me, oh man, I remember exactly when I met him as well, in San Francisco. He's like, the Regis, is it St. Regis, whatever?
Yeah, the St. Regis.
We're meeting with that, and he's like, hey, we want to do the deal, but instead of the one board seat, we want 2 board seats now. And I'm like, but that wasn't agreed on. He goes, yeah. He goes, but you have no choice. And I said, I have a choice. And I gave him flipped him the bird, told him F off. And I left that, and I'm like, crap, we have no choice. What did I just do? I told my co-founder, we're both like, oh, man, I don't know what we do. We had another previous investor who was like, hey, I'll put in $500,000 in the round as well. Had to ring them. They were guys from Belgium. I rang them and I said, hey, Laurent, Patrice, like, it's over. Like we're done. We have no money. The lead investor, I just told him some really nice way to, still, we're not going to take his money. I don't know. So thank you for, investing. And Laurent was like, oh, Jindou, don't worry about it. We will give you $500,000. We will wire it. And I'm like, how about the paperwork? Oh, we will figure it out. And I was like, what just happened? We were thrown a lifeline. And so I remember hanging up from the call. My co-founder and I were in my junior studio. Is that even a thing? A junior studio, a small studio in San Francisco, sitting on our sofa bed couch thing, looking at our monitor. And then the bank account ticked over, and we had $500,000 in the bank. And we're like, we can live another day. So
Wow.
that was painful.
Wow. What a story. That, I actually, what you said there, I want to go back to what you said about the terms, because
Mhm.
I think that's such an important, if people take actually just one lesson, actually, if a founder takes one lesson,
Yeah.
there are no real standard terms.
Yep.
I mean, there are standard terms, but to your point, it is negotiable. And one thing I think founders don't realize is that by the time you've received a term sheet, the amount of work that had to happen on the venture side to get
Mhm.
approval to give you the term sheet, they've had to corral everyone, convince everyone, give them a whole use business case. It's a deal for them. Like you said, they have their own metrics. They
Yeah.
just did all of that. They want the conversion rate
Exactly.
from contract out to term sheet out to close. They want that to be high themselves. And so once that you've got the term sheet in your hand, it is negotiable,
Yeah.
and I think that that's the part that people, including myself, you don't really realize. You're like, well, those are the terms, and they told me those are the terms, and that it can't be negotiated.
Yeah.
I need the money, so I'm not going to negotiate the terms. When in reality, I'd say most term sheets by multi-time founders or who have amazing lawyers, or they get negotiated.
Yeah. And yeah, no, I totally agree. I'm going to share a controversial thought. So you feel free to do what you want with this
Mm.
thought. But if Charlie Munger always said, like, show me the incentives, I'll show you the outcome. Right? Like that's what Charlie Munger used to say. And if you think about the attorney and this whole industry with the attorneys, their customer is the VC, is the investor, because they get repeat business, a lot of
Mm.
repeat subscription business from the investor, right? We are just the one-off transaction to the attorney. And
Mhm.
so what I found was, like, a lot of attorneys will tell you it is standard because they don't want to piss off the brand name
Mm.
VCs.
Mm.
I was fortunate just to work with a guy that just didn't like that world, and he saw through it, and he's like, I'm going to help you navigate this world. Um, and so I understand why it's standard, because it's just, a group of them came together,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And then with the VCs that backed them and said, hey, how do we just make this cheaper, easier, like a process, and template it? And they came up with the 10 things. The VCs got to look at their terms and went, yep, that sounds about right. There's enough wiggle room for us to do what we need and give the founders a good deal. But I think as the company gets larger and larger, I think to your point, first if you start on the wrong foot, you're in trouble. But as the company gets bigger and bigger, the games get harder and harder to play,
Yes. Yes.
right?
Yes.
And you move from a VC to a private equity. Oh my God, like their
No more
whole
games. No more
it's
games.
it's it's unfair.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um. So I think let's move kind of to the next topic. So the next topic for me is, what is the biggest challenge you've ever faced at HappyCo, and how did you overcome that challenge?
Hmm. It's always the people for me. Like the people are the hardest, the biggest challenges I always face. And maybe because I err too much on the side of caring about people. And specifically to me, it's the ones that have just crushed me and hurt me the most in this whole journey. The people that you bring on early in the phase, early in the company's phase, the company grows and we've kind of outgrown them. And having that really hard conversation, like someone that you've spent so much blood, sweat, and tears in the trenches with, and you have to look them in the eye and say, hey, we have to move on from you. Like you can't help us to the next level. Like, it's such a blow. It's, and I've had like friendships, relationships that have just been broken because of that. Or maybe either not having that conversation early enough, handling it the wrong way. I didn't have that conversation. Someone else had the conversation, misinterpretation, or just people that just can't handle hey, you know what? You're actually not supermodel. You're model, but you're not supermodel.
Hmm.
Oh my God, my
Hmm.
looks. I think that's a really hard, the hardest lessons for me is like just learning how to cope with that, how to have that conversation, and just, yeah, that's been. It's been tough.
I think the pain from those conversations, which my sense is in every interview I've done, people have had this same pain. And I think my lesson, and I'm sure you as well, after you do it a certain number of times, you start to realize that having the honest conversation earlier, or or more often, or whatever the case may be, turns out, as painful as it feels, ends up paying off so much more down the line, where you're saying, hey, you're amazing. We are planning to scale. And as we do, and we go to this next level, is this something you really wanted? Is this where you think your skills are the best? And having that conversation earlier, it doesn't necessarily make it easier, but I think you can at least avoid the broken friendship. You can avoid some of the level of pain if it's like done together. At least that's what I found.
Completely agree with you. Like, in hindsight, looking at all the stuff that I've been through, I'm like, if I had that conversation earlier, more frank, more candid, like I could have repaired it. Like I would have prevented a lot of stuff. We could have moved on quickly. Because the kicker is, like, there's a guy that was very early with us, probably employee 1 or number 2, maybe, had that tough conversation. We didn't speak for 4 or 5 years. Then after 4 or 5, he just hated me. And then after 4 or 5 years, he progressed in his career, joined another couple of startups, like had some good exits and other things. And he came back and he said, hey, you were right. Like I was out of my depth, like I was like, it was just too much of my ego, blah, blah, blah. And like I've had people come out and thank me, like, for helping them to find the next thing. And so I'm like, oh, it actually works out well to our earlier conversation about, like, hey, people find like another organization that's more appropriate, the right fit for them. So they end up finding that. But it's really just like how, I wish I had those conversations earlier. But when I was early, especially even now, these days I have that conversation much earlier now. And more candid and frank. But earlier on, I just didn't know. I was worried to hurt someone, but I ended up hurting them more.
Right.
Bringing it on them when it's too late. So that's the most painful thing, I think, for me. Yeah.
One of the I want to transition to your background and your story in a second, but when you look out 3 years from today, 2028, and you think about HappyCo, what does it look like 3 years from today? What is the dream?
Yeah, so I would love for us to, like, the whole thing for me is like, how do we build, how do we really change the landscape of our industry, right? We have the biggest property management companies in the world, and lots of medium, small size ones as well. We have 4.5 million units that use our products today. I just think, like, I love real estate. That's why I'm still doing this, and I love technology. I just want to continue to be a great partner to our customers. I want to solve more problems for them. I want to look back and go, oh my gosh, wow, the 10 problems that we know the customer has, we've solved it. We've thought about a very different way, a much better way to run properties so that the operating companies are more efficient. The staff is happier, the residents are happier. Like, renting today is a really, really crappy exercise for everyone, right? It's so inefficient. So I would love to be able to kind of just keep solving, streamlining the whole process. One of the goals I have for HappyCo and the industry is I want other SaaS companies to look at HappyCo and go, oh my God, that's the gold standard of, like, software, like how a company can partner with customers, an enterprise or whatever it is. Today we're like the really ugly, the stepchild of the stepchild. Like the software industry is horrible. Like how we treat customers, it's just nothing's integrated properly. I hope to kind of see a world where the software is easy to use. We're pushing the boundaries with automation, whether it's AI or just something like a Zapier Zap or whatever it is. But I think there's an opportunity to kind of really streamline the industry. And I want people to go, wow, they've built a vertically integrated, like, ecosystem where it partners with other new software providers. It doesn't happen in our industry today. So that's in 3 years. I think that's what I think we can achieve.
That's awesome. All right, so let's transition to your story, your background. So
Yeah.
you're from Australia,
Yeah.
uh, and you mentioned your parents a couple times. Can you maybe share a little bit more about your upbringing, their backgrounds?
Yeah, so they were born in Singapore, and I was born in Singapore. I don't know why I said they. We were all born in Singapore. Um, like they had really large families. I think 7 or 8 kids in each household. Back then, as they were growing up, Singapore wasn't a very rich country. It was kind of like Lee Kuan Yew came in and was starting to change Singapore to be a powerhouse, but it was in the works. Um, so they grew up really poor. My mom and dad never, I think they didn't even go to high school. They just did primary school education. Um, my dad took a job as a printer in Australia. He thought he was going to go to like the land of opportunity. Turns out he went to Darwin, which is like, I don't know, like someone going, hey, let's go to the US. Let's go to the best place. Where? Wyoming. Like, oh, okay. This is really fun. So he kind of went there. My mom never really, she's had odd jobs all her life. Like, we call it a checkout chick, a cashier. She's at like working in restaurants. Uh, yeah, like not like there's no like real career that they had. So they didn't really grow up wealthy, but it was interesting. Like looking back, I never felt like I was poor. I didn't feel like I was poor growing up because I think as an only child, they gave me everything I needed. Um, yeah, for some weird reason, I never felt poor. And it was only, I think when I was 15, yeah, I was 15 was when I realized, oh, we are poor. you know, oh, okay. I get clothes, but it's like not the Louis Vuitton. It's just not LV. It's a VL or something.
Right, right.
Um, yeah. So they didn't grow up rich. We migrated to Australia when I was 2 years old, and then yeah, my dad. I'm just had a lot of great memories. I grew up in Darwin. So it was just a really fun place. It's like very backwards, rural. I grew up with a Greek family for about 6, 7 years. The lady who looked after me, because my mom and dad would work 2 shifts, and the lady who looked after me we lived in a caravan, a trailer essentially.
Mhm.
When we first got there. One day I kind of ran across the fence. The trailer was let me clarify this. The trailer was parked in the gravel parking lot of my dad's workplace. It's like it wasn't even legal. I don't know how we had to shower in his offices. Um, Next door to his office was a house that was attached to the Greek Orthodox Church. So one day that I was playing with the ball, it ran across the fence, and I disappeared for like an hour. My mom freaked out. This lady, beautiful golden hair, old lady, comes across the fence. Is like, hey, Ella, hey, like, baby. She couldn't speak English. Yeah, and she was Greek, and that was I call her Yaya. So Yaya looked after me for 6 years. She couldn't speak English. Bapu my grandfather was the priest of the Orthodox Church.
Wow.
Yeah. So it
Wow.
was a wild story. Like learn how to speak Greek.
Yeah, you
Like
speak more Greek than me. We were
yes,
talking the other
it
day.
it was such a great time. And yeah, so that's how I kind of grew up, like in Darwin.
Wow. Wow. And then you went to Adelaide, right? Because
Yeah. So I went to Adelaide I didn't know what I want to study. I did this graphic design subject in my last year of high school, but I got full marks for it. I didn't have to try at all. Like it was fun. I was using Photoshop, making logos, business cards. I'm like, this is a thing. It's easy. Um, so I met a girl in Adelaide at that stage, and the the opportunity was like, hey, what do you want to study? And I'm like, I don't know, graphic design, I guess. So I applied for it, got in. You only needed like 50 out of 100 to get in. Like it was like, and I already had 50 from doing 2 subjects earlier, like 2 year 12 subjects earlier than others. So basically on the 2 subjects, I was at 50. So I got in, I moved to Adelaide, just studying graphic design. That's essentially what I did.
but now you have an office there, right?
Yeah, we have an office there. So after I graduated, worked for a video gaming company called Midway Games. Midway were the guys who built Mortal Kombat, you know, NBA Ballers, Dukes of Hazzard. NBA Ballers, Blitz the League. So I was running the UI UX team at the company. Really enjoyed it. It was, I got to work on like games were my passion. I grew up playing games, and so that's essentially what I did. So I started working in a video gaming company. I kind of got really bored, and this is kind of a theme of my early career. I worked in a place I just got really bored because I felt like I wasn't giving my all. Yeah, and that's why I kind of started a lot of side hustles or side businesses. Yeah, I had probably about 14 or 15 small businesses. One was a ladies' jewelry and fashion handbag import-export business. I realized, so we actually had distributors across Australia that was selling our products. We would get them manufactured in China and Thailand. But I realized that I just am not good at selling female fashion. I'm too honest. If you ask me, do you think I look good in this handbag? I'm like, nope, it's too small for you. No sale. So I just learned that I wasn't passionate about it. So we broke even, and I remember when I closed that business down, I just have a whole garage full of jewelry and handbags. And so every birthday, Jindou's going to give you jewelry and handbags from 3 seasons ago.
That's great.
Yeah.
What how do your parents feel about what you're doing?
I think they're proud and like, hey, they don't really know what I do, right? They when I go visit my dad, he's just like, hey, can you fix my internet? Because technology, computers. But I think they're proud of me. Like, Asian culture, you don't really say it that much. You don't be like, hey, good job. It's like, do better. But I think they're proud of me. And I think I look back at my career and I look at what I've done. And I think I mentioned to you, like, all I wanted to do was get to $1 million in revenue.
Yeah.
This is how dumb I thought. $1 million in revenue, I could sell the company and make $1 million. That's how silly I was, right? And even today, I'm like, I don't need more money than what we could easily sell the company. We could exit, we could walk away, but I'm just proud that I've achieved more than what I set out to do. I'm sure my parents feel the same way. We don't even talk about work and business. They don't care.
Interesting.
It's such a weird thing. Like, they weren't business people, so I didn't really have like this is my role model. I'm like,
but the work ethic probably comes from watching
for sure. So, I'll share a quick story about the work ethic. So, I mentioned I was investing in real estate. The reason why I did that was because I wanted to build passive income, because my dad was working, like crazy shifts, worked all his life, and I wanted to let him retire or at least have some money so he can kind of like stop working. So I busted my ass for like 6-7 years. Every single dollar I put in real estate. I did flips, renovations, kept working 2 jobs, freelancing on the side, just to buy property. Got to a stage where I could help him to retire, so enough passive income. So I go to my dad, you can retire now. I've got enough money. You can relax. He looks at me. He goes like, and then what would I do? So yeah, the first thing I did wrong was I never asked the customer what they wanted. And then the second one, I'm like, wow, like my dad loves working. He's in his 70s and he still works today.
Like story.
To me, I'm like, maybe that work ethic is instilled in me. And I think like, what else would I do? And I see, my rich friends and they're just bored and suicidal. Like,
yeah. If you could go, knowing everything you know today, if you could go back to the very beginning of your career, what is one piece of advice you would give yourself?
Besides invest in NVIDIA, one piece of advice, I would like tell myself to move to Silicon Valley from day one and just start a business or something, because I was never happy when I was working as just a straight graphic designer or web designer, because I felt like I was being creative, but I missed out on the other challenges, the sales, trying to find product market fit, how do you get success? How do you, like, I really enjoyed that designing and building of companies and systems. And I just wish I did it earlier. Then, yeah, and I probably would have a much better time in my early 20s.
This was great. If people, I think people probably gonna listen to this and want to reach out. Like, is the best way email, LinkedIn,
Yeah,
some other?
ping me on LinkedIn. I'm the only Jindou Lee on LinkedIn, I think. Maybe there's one other fraudulent guy, but I'm the only one on LinkedIn. Yeah, that's the best way to get in touch.
Awesome. Thank you. This was really, this is amazing. I really appreciate you being so transparent and open, because I think that is how we kind of help the next generation. And so I learned a lot from this also. And so thank you very much.
Welcome. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, for everyone who's listening, I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please share this with your networks. And we'll see you for the next episode of Not Another CEO Podcast. That's a wrap for this week's episode of Not Another CEO Podcast. Thanks for joining. For show notes and more, please visit notanotherceopodcast.com. We'll see you next week.